You know, people automatically think just because I'm Native and gay that I've had a horrible, tragic life. When the fact of the matter is I have a life that most straight white people in this country can only dream about, you know?
Concert pianist, librettist, novelist, and playwright, Tomson Highway's life has taken him from the trap lines of northern Manitoba to the stages of the world. His plays are studied at universities all over North America, and he has almost single-handedly created the vibrant and viable Native theatre in Canada. We met with him on stage at the Canadian Stage in Toronto.
Tomson, I think it's fair to say that all of us our adult lives are informed by our formative years. That's why they're called our formative years. I would think that your life, your adult life, would be more informed by what was probably the dichotomy of your early years, the more exaggerated extremes, I would think, than most people would have. Idyllic to start with, certainly less than idyllic as it became later when you were in a residential school.
Oh, that's a mistake.
Is that right?
The residential school experience for me was a fantastic experience.
Is that right?
So much of that is reported, you know, that's skewed. It's not quite right. They don't have the whole picture. There was a lot of us who had positive experiences at the Native residential school. You know, people automatically think just because I'm Native and gay that I've had a horrible, tragic life. When the fact of the matter is I have a life that most straight white people in this country can only dream about, you know? I have a fantastic, spectacular life. Yeah. And that is just a really terrible mistake to look at me as a loser when I'm actually a winner. Yeah. You know?
And I wasn't suggesting for a minute that you were, but I am, I've got to say, surprised when you say that the residential experience was a good one for you.
Yeah, it was. I learned how to speak English. Yeah. I learned how to play the piano. You know,
that's where it started.
Let me ask you, how many 18-year-old white boys from Rosedale can step up to a concert stage in a tuxedo and play an entire concert upon request?
Yeah. That started at residential school, the piano thing.
Oh, yeah.
Was that? Tell me how that came about. Then, I mean, did you just have a natural inclination towards the piano at the time?
I've always had music in my family. My father was an accordion player. My grandfather was a legendary fiddle player, and people in my family play guitar and sang and everything. There's always been music in my family. Always from the very, very, very beginning.
And so, in residential school, that was something that
there was a piano there in one of the rooms, and I used to sneak in and I started to teach myself because when the first time I heard it, I became obsessed. And I started to teach myself, and there was a little old nun. It was run by 12 nuns, 3 priests, and 3 brothers. And this little old nun picked me up as a student, and I started learning. It was late though. I started when I was 11, which is not very good for when you want to be a concert pianist. When you want to be, the field of concert piano playing is so competitive that you pretty well have to start when you're 3. Yeah. That's and terrifying. Like Glenn Gould's mother was a piano teacher, you know, and he lived here. He was born and raised in Toronto, and his the best musical education facility in the country was like 3 kilometers away from his house, namely the University, the Conservatory of Music here in Toronto. I mean, I was up on the Manitoba-Nunavut border where the nearest piano was like 300 miles away. So I never really got a chance to start until I was 11. Yeah. And I went very, very quickly through it. I went from grade 1 to grade 5 in 1 year. And I think I was precocious, and I learned very, very quickly. But still, it was way too late to be a competitive concert pianist. Yes. I mean, when I was 22, I could have done a small career on the national scene, but I was not good enough for a major international
And you
career.
think that difference, just in terms of the latency?
Well, I understand that, like Walter Kisageetin, for instance, who was a legendary concert pianist, started when he was 15, but that's unusual. Most of them, like Martha Argerich, who is probably the greatest woman concert pianist today, started when she was 3 as well, in the city of Buenos Aires, which is one of the biggest cities on earth with great musical educational facilities right there at her doorstep. On top of which her father happened to be a diplomat who happened to be a friend of Juan Perron's, who appointed him ambassador to Austria when Martha was 13, so that little Martha could take piano lessons in Vienna, you know. So that by the time she was 18, the world was at her feet. Not that I'm knocking her or anything, because she's my hero, but you know, those kinds of opportunities aren't available to people from the most isolated parts of Canada, like myself. Yeah.
When you look back on that, do you wish that it had been other than that? Do you wish that you had gone into piano?
No. Sorry, what was the question?
Well, it would. I mean, given the way
do I wish that I had not gone into piano?
Well, no, that you had gone into it, that you had a piano start earlier, and that would have been your life now.
No, I'm glad the way it happened, because now I play cabaret. I'm not stuck with a classical repertoire, which would take me about 6 months to relearn because the amount of technique that playing those Chopin arpeggios and runs, you need a concert pianist needs to practice. Well, the reason why piano players, professional pianists, concert pianists, and jazz musicians are so good is because that's all they do every day, 6 hours a day, 50 weeks a year, 6 days a week. Just like bus drivers drive buses 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, 50 weeks a year. They become very good bus drivers. Well, you become a very good piano player, guitar player, sax player when you spend that amount of time. My piano playing now is mostly a hobby. I get my bread and butter from writing plays and writing novels, and I use it as a counterbalance to the solitary life of a writer, because it allows me about 2 months a year to go out into the public and meet my public and play the piano for them. But no, I'm not in the least bit sorry about the fact that I didn't become a concert pianist. I'm glad that I got the technique for it, and I'm glad I got the musical education for it, that I'm conversationally familiar with the great works of Beethoven and Brahms and Schubert and Ravel and all the rest of it. And I'm conversational with it, and I learned extraordinary lessons from their compositional abilities and techniques so that I can write. Well, I can't write like Chopin, but I certainly had learned certain lessons about melodic construction from him, for instance, and so on and so forth. But no, ultimately my life is so fantastic that I think the best thing that a person can say about their life is that if I were to live it over again, I'd do it exactly the same way. It's just been fantastic.
Okay, you just talked about something that I'm really intrigued by. Yeah. You talk about the structure of music and writing music. Is there a link, to you at least, when you're writing plays or when you're working on a novel?
Oh, totally, yeah.
The music, the structure of music in your mind, does that inform the way you write?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, every step of the way. Well, first of all, on a larger arc, studies have been done to the effect that if you look at the most successful people in any field, be it business, politics, education, religion, medicine, or otherwise, you will almost find somewhere within their social history the factor of musical literacy, that they have studied music, that they know how to. Musical literacy being the fact that you can read the television in a C major chord and a C minor chord and what makes it happen. To be able to read a line of music at least, and preferably be conversationally familiar with Beethoven's 29th Sonata, Piano Sonata, Opus 109 is in E major, and what the movements are precisely, and so on and so forth. But there's a 3-page trill in the last movement between pages 33 and 37, and that kind of stuff, and what exactly happens to the harmonica. That kind of music literacy, which I have under my fingertips, they say that that's one of the reasons why those people have become successful, and I believe it, because musical wisdom, and I call it sonic wisdom, the ability to, you've been given a kind of sixth sense that other people don't have. You've been given the ability to understand human life from the perspective of sonic reality. I don't know how else to explain that, but rhythm, the concept of rhythm, and so on and so forth, and it's just a fantastic ability. And so I have that because it's been drilled into my head, into my body. Although drilled is not quite the term. Trained. I'm extremely well trained as a piano player. And the greatest teacher that I had, the last one that I had, the one who turned me into a true pianist, had the same teacher as Glenn Gould, for instance. Oh, yeah? So my pianistic pedigree is pretty fancy. And so, having said that, yes, absolutely. To me, I play everything. Human language is rhythm. Human language is music. We're all jazz musicians. We all make music. Every time we open our mouths, we make music. Like that? Yes, of course. And this and that and this and that and this and that? Yes. That's all music. And when you give that kind of language put that kind of language into the mouth of a character on stage, it's like me writing music. It's like reading a line for a violin or a cello or a saxophone. And so and then you have your staccato characters and your legato characters and your spiccato characters and your allegro con brio characters and your presto characters and your largo characters. Some people talk very slowly and have a very heavy cadence to their manner of speech, and others talk like this. It's very nervous. They scurry around like a mouse. And that's presto. They talk presto all the time. They're always nervous. They're always excited. That kind of stuff. And the counterbalance of those two voices on a stage is electric, but beyond that, it's basically the first responsibility of a writer is to lull their audience or their readership into a state of hypnosis with the very simple factor of rhythm. Boom. The most basic rhythm, of course, being the beat of the human heart, and so on and so forth.
So this suggests then that when you're writing, I would think, you must do an awful lot of rewriting of dialogue.
Oh, totally, yeah. That's one of the most common mistakes. I teach writing once in a while. I do come out of my cubbyhole usually for the months of May, just before we get back to Canada from France, and the month of October, just before we leave for France.
Right.
Before we leave Canada for France.
You have a schedule.
Well, yeah, and so that the rest of the 10 months I can stay home and be quiet and anonymous and totally at peace with my own work and my own life. And but the most common mistake that writing students make is that they think that the first draft is it. No, it's not. It's far, far from it. But I would venture to say that maybe by draft 6 or draft 7, you're ready for production or publication. But it's a long, arduous journey, and it's all about taking a piece. It's like picking a piece of marble, a piece of stone, and shaving sections off here and there and everything. And it takes a while before the real thing that you want to portray emerges from that marble, so to speak. Yeah, but it's all about finding the music in that piece.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of writers over the years, novelists as well as playwrights, writers of all kinds, and one of the things that's always intrigued me about it, and I wanted to ask you about this too, because you've alluded to it in a way. You're talking about all the rewriting that you do, the crafting, the structuring that you do of a play, making sure that the characters are those musical elements.
Yeah.
And then when it's out there in the world, you have to let it go. And at a certain point, it's no longer yours. Now, a novel is one thing. It gets out there, and it's still in the form in which you created it, and it's out there, and people are buying it and reading it, and they're reading into it what they want to. Play, on the other hand, that you create goes out there, and each time it's mounted, there may be a different director who changes the flow of that play or changes the intent of what you originally had intended. Is that a difficult one for you when you see this, when you know that you wanted it to go a certain way, but somebody else had a different idea when they direct one of your works?
I mean, I don't see very much of my work. I mean, it's produced constantly, but I don't actually go out of my way to go and see stuff.
No. For that reason?
No, not for that reason, because I live in isolated circumstances in both countries that I live in. I don't live in cities, and so I don't see all that much theater of my own. But no, after a while, you just let go, and you're happy when a director understands what you're getting at and understands and does a very good job of interpreting it.
Yeah.
And then you don't feel very good about directors who don't do that. Directors who have in the past, for instance, completely changed my intention. Like I never wrote that. Like they've changed things in the text that was completely contrary to my wishes.
You mean like literally altered the text?
No.
Or just the
spin? For instance, a certain monologue was meant to be read on a stage by a motionless actor, or a series of 3 motionless actors, a trio of actors playing monologue 1, monologue 2, monologue 3, still, and just oration in a sense.
Right.
And this one director took those 3, and they have a very specific rhythm to their delivery, to their writing and to their delivery. And this director put them in the context of a dance, where she has absolutely no understanding whatsoever of the rhythm of the piece, and the dance movements and the music that she had chosen for this piece was completely contrary to the rhythm of the inherent in the writing of the piece. So you'll get directors like that, and you'll get very good directors. But it's like like composers. You have terrible interpreters of songs, and then you have extraordinary interpreters of songs. And you can ask that of any composer. Imagine if Holland Dozier Holland, I'm reading something about Motown right now, hadn't had Diana Ross to sing their songs.
That's right.
Those songs wouldn't be immortal.
No.
Yeah.
All in the interpretation. You're right. Yeah, no, that's true. I want to ask you about some of the influences that you might have had when you were starting to write. I know that when you were at Western, I guess it was you met James Reaney. You worked with James Reaney, who I met once before he passed away. And was it he who introduced you to Michel Tremblay's work?
No, I met him. I met Michel Tremblay years and years later, but I saw my first piece by Michel Tremblay around the same time as James Reaney, but no, he didn't introduce it. He didn't introduce Michel Tremblay to me. No.
Did you have any influences in terms of when you started writing plays and so on? Were you drawing from anybody else's, not their work specifically, but their ideas, their approaches?
Well, there's a number of influences that I can cite. James Reaney was certainly one of them. The first thing that impressed me about James Reaney was the way he told his stories on 2 levels. There was the level of humanity and then the level of divinity. There was always Christian mythological symbolism superimposed on top of his human stories. And then it comes from also my study of literature, and certainly the works of James Joyce, for instance, just to name one writer, whose book Ulysses made an impression on me insofar as he tells, like James Joyce, he tells the story on two levels. There's the story of Mr. Bloom on the one level, on the human level, and then there's the story of the gods on the other level, just like Homer did with the original piece, the Odyssey, right? So telling the story always on two levels, the level of humanity and the level of divinity at the same time, is always something that I've strived for.
Yes.
I tell my stories in that manner. In fact, quite frequently my sets will be divided into two levels: the human level and the divine level. And the divine level is for a very intensive exploration that'll probably take the rest of my life of the three mythologies that I see as having most come to influence me as the thinker. Those three mythologies being Christian mythology, Greek mythology, and Aboriginal mythology. One of which is a monotheistic mythology, the other one is a polytheistic mythology, the third one of which is a pantheistic mythology. Meaning to say that one mythology, one superstructure, I call it, mythological, theological superstructure, has one god only. The other one of which has many gods and goddesses.
Yes.
And the third one of which has a system of divinity that is self-evident in all of nature. Yeah. Anyway, and that's why. So I tell those mythological stories, and I superimpose them on human.
Yes.
On just plain ordinary human beings who live here in Ontario.
Yeah. You have, it's been said, or you've said, that the Rez Sisters and Dry Lips are part of what was to be, or may still be, I guess, from what you just said, a 7-part cycle. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the third has already been produced. Rose hasn't been seen very often.
Right.
Very much because it's so big. And but yeah, they are, and the fourth one's already in my head. I know exactly what it's. I know sort of what it's about, but. Yeah.
How did you know 7 though?
I suppose the number chose me. I didn't choose it. It just happened. You know, it's a magic number. It's always been the number of necromancers and wizards and all that sort of stuff. You know, and I believe that artists are wizards of a sort. I believe that when you go to theater school, you're going to wizard school, you're learning how to weave spells that entrance people. You know, that throw people into a trance. That's the responsibility of an artist, right? As it is the responsibility of a wizard. And so a wizard needs certain tools to weave those spells. And numerology, I guess part of me thinks that numerology is part of that magic. You know, the number 3 is very special. The numbers 1, 3, 7, and 11 I find particularly powerful in my. And there's probably very specific reasons for that if you really read into numerology, which I'd never have yet. But that's where it comes from.
So do you know where you're going to go? I mean, you say you have 4 in your head, the fourth one in your head.
Yeah.
After that, it will just come to you, you figure, at some point? You'll know where you want to go?
Oh, yeah. I think I know where I want to go. Yeah. Yeah. For instance, there's a death, one character dies in each play, and I want to write, I probably will end up writing an 8th, where all 7 characters appear in the afterlife.
The deceased characters?
Yeah. Appear in the afterlife and discuss the earth and human behavior. Just like another play that really influenced me, that really that I really find influential is Our Town by Thornton Wilder.
Yes.
Yeah, where the last act takes place in the afterlife. You know, where he places the last act of his play, the third act of his play, in what the Greeks would call Hades, the afterlife. You know, what the Christians would call hell or heaven. You know, and what we Native people call just the earth. You know, when you die, you don't go to heaven or hell. You stay here. You just assume another form of energy, and that's where pantheism comes into the picture.
That leads me to want to ask you about your brother, Rene, and the impact that he had and still has, I would think, on your life, because he was a significant figure in your life and still is a significant figure in your life, is he not?
Yeah.
You were very close, the two of you?
Totally, yeah. We grew up like twins. You know. We were the 11th and 12th of a 12-child family.
And when you first started doing theater, he was choreographing some of you.
Well, he was a dancer.
Yeah.
He danced his way around the world. The company based here in Toronto called the Toronto Dance Theatre, and unfortunately, the unfortunate thing about a dancer's career is that by the time they're 30, they have to start looking at the possibility of retiring.
Yes.
And precious few make it beyond the age of 40, unless you're a Rudolf Nureyev or a Mikhail Baryshnikov. Most of them branch off into teaching. eventually, or into related forms of body work, like whatever, and then others take on totally different careers, like Veronica Tinner, for instance, became a television producer. Somebody else I know became a real estate agent, and so on and so forth. You just move on, and but a lot of them, and some of them, a blessed few, a lucky few, started experimenting with choreography. And that's what he was doing as he was approaching the age of 30, was starting to experiment with the choreography. And one of the first things that a choreographer needs is music to choreograph to. So I hadn't played the piano in quite a while because I was doing social work at that point in time with the Native community, which is something which I think should be an essential part of an artist's training, is to go out there and do social work. Like, get yourself involved in real life, and real life drama. And it just enriches your, especially as a writer, enriches your vision, your field of experience. In any case, so I had all the chops for. I have a degree in music, and to earn a degree in music, you have to have you have to have studied all the different aspects of music: form, counterpoint, harmony, history, and so on and so forth. We even studied orchestration. I know how to write for an orchestra. If you were to put a gun to my head, I could write you a symphony. Although I wouldn't do it because it's just not worth doing, because first of all, it's a tremendous amount of work, and after all, and after you finish, who'd play it? Even at union rates, consider what a 2-hour rehearsal costs for 100
That's the reality,
musicians,
yeah.
And so on and so forth. And that's just the rehearsal, never mind the performance, and so on and so forth. So, but I do have the chops for writing music, as it turns out, and I never thought I was capable of writing music, because composition was never one of my ambitions. But I did write a piece, 10-minute piece, and it worked. So that worked so well. So he started asking me another one, and we did a 20-piece and a 30-minute piece. And because I was writing experimental music, and he was doing experimental dance with a lot of performance art aspects to it, multimedia aspects to it, the marriage of music and text got closer and closer, because I kept adding words into the score in several languages. And so the marriage of text and music got closer and closer until finally, around age 42, I realized I was completely capable of writing songs. So I became songs for cabaret. Cabaret being music written for the theater, songs written for the theater, A, and B, songs that tell a story with a narrative line, songs that have a narrative line. And so now, as a hobby more than anything else, I do cabaret around the world with a sensational singer and a sensational saxophonist. And we're doing one here right now. There's my piano right here.
Yes. Yeah. And do you like doing that? Because it seems to be, you talk about the isolation that, all writers are isolated, but I get the sense that you, to some degree or another, enjoy that isolation.
I enjoy the isolation.
So is it painful? Is it painful then to have to come out and do things like
no.
do the cabaret?
No,
sit here with me?
Margaret, the best writers in the world will tell you that if they were to spend their entire time in solitude, Margaret Atwood has been known to say this, if they were to spend their entire time in solitude, it would drive them crazy, drive them batty. You do need to go out and meet your public. You don't need to go out and press hands and be with people, be surrounded by laughing people and the sound of human laughter and all that sort of stuff, the human voice, And so cabaret, doing about 12 to 15 shows a year allows me that. And I teach a little bit, and I do public speaking during the months, as I say, the months of October and the months of May. I tour the world. I generally tour North America in October and Europe in May. And sometimes I've been known to do everything from Dawson City, Yukon, right down to Santa Fe, New Mexico, within the space of 4 weeks. That kind of stuff. And then the other 10 months, I can stay quiet and be completely happy living by the Mediterranean coast of France and listening to the sea every day. I go down, I have my favorite cliff, because it's where the Pyrenees plunge into the Mediterranean, so it's cliffs everywhere. And I go down to my favorite hidden coves and read my Bible and my Koran and study my mythology, my world mythology, and that's where I do all my thinking. And here in Northern Ontario, I live by a lake, and I have my favorite hideouts on these, because it's around Sudbury, right? So there's all these cliffs, us going down into the water.
Cliffs again.
Oh my goodness, it's just fantastic. And I come from that kind of landscape. I come from northern Manitoba. I come from a privileged background insofar as we had the great privilege of growing up in 2 languages, neither of which was French and English, French or English, which is privilege. When you compare that, again, the proverbial white kid from Rosedale, Ontario, who grew up maybe in 1 language, if that, which gives you the extraordinary ability to an adulthood to absorb languages just like that.
Do you think in Cree when you're writing?
I think now I think in French, English, and Cree.
French, English, and Cree?
Yeah. I hardly ever speak English anymore, because I live in France in the wintertime, and in the summertime I live in French Ontario. So I like to tease white people, like people up in, what was the name of the area where you have your cottage?
Shawville.
Yeah, Shawville. That if a Cree Indian boy born in a tent in a snowbank on the Manitoba-Nunavut border can become fluent in 5 languages, why can't a white man from Shawville learn 2? You know? I just find that unilingualism is really a handicap. Really,
Yes,
it really is. Yeah, it really is. You know the way I put it to my students? Unilingualism is like sitting at a dinner party where you're doing all the talking and you talk about nothing but yourself. It means that you're not listening to what others have to say. It means you're not interested. And that is not only rude, it is dangerous to close your mind like that, you know? And so I consider myself, among other things, a linguistic activist. I believe not only in bilingualism, I believe in multilingualism, and I promote it wherever I can. You know?
In our last couple of minutes, I want to go back to something that you mentioned at the very beginning when I was asking about the residential schools, and you were talking about how that issue has been skewed. And of course, right now, again, it has come back as a huge issue in the Canadian society again. Are you disturbed by the way it is presented? I mean, everybody has this monolithic image of what the residential school experience was for every Aboriginal kid who went to it.
Well,
does that bother you?
A little bit, yeah. Because yes, some people have terrible experiences, but it's a very personal thing. I mean, I don't want to go forcing my opinion on people's lives. I'm just saying that personally myself had a great experience. You know, I had a wonderful experience, and I believe that it's very personal. I believe that other people have had much worse experiences. I think the Jews of the Second World War in the Second World War had a much worse experience. The president of Argentina is in town right now, and I'd really like to tell her that, you know, like if Canada had a policy of assimilation for its native people, Argentina had a policy of extermination for its native people. And I've been to Buenos Aires. I've spent time in Argentina 2 years ago, and in fact, there's a tango in our show that I wrote in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and you know. There is not a single native person left in Argentina except for the extreme north, and that spillover from Bolivia and Paraguay and countries like that, because they exterminated every single man, woman, and child in that country from the very beginning of its colonial history. We didn't have that happen here in Canada. They tried to educate us. They made mistakes, but they tried. They didn't exterminate us. I'm still here, having a great time. I've been educated. I've been given an extraordinary future, an extraordinary present, and an extraordinary future, and that's where I stand personally.
Yeah. Well, it's awfully good of you to talk to us when you're in the middle of all of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
But I appreciate it, and it was good to meet you.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Well, thank you
Thanks
very
a
much.
lot.